Rocket ship go now. Hello, I am Robert Ogilvy, Executive Strategist and EQ Coach. Glad you guys could join me for another video. Today's question, today's topic, today's issue. What are the secrets to building a self-managed team? All right, so you guys may have heard this at this point. This is often, I would say, the end game aspiration of a lot of agile and a lot of change management efforts. You want your team to be self-managed, and I'll even get into what this means for a team to be self-governing. These are things you've probably heard of and you might want, right? And on a natural, easy level, you could. It makes total sense if you're a manager, if you're some team leader, that you don't you want to put as little effort into your team as possible, right? There's a certain kind of natural human laziness, but also at its best a kind of respectful, oh, good, you got your shit together, so I don't need to do anything, right? And so we can actually appreciate it. What's much harder is how do we get them to that point of being self-managed? Particularly without just jumping to the laissez-faire end of things. I mean, often when they use the term laissez-faire leadership style, it's intended very backhandedly, right? There's something that should be happening that, frankly, the leader in whatever sense is being lazy, is being irresponsible, is being, or more subtle, just neglectful, not really tapping into. There's potential there for improvement that's not happening, right? So how do we actually build up that team to self-manage? So related question, what is the right amount of structure to give a team that you are managing? Just contemplate that for a second. What's the right amount of structure? Okay, now obviously I haven't set the parameters. So the right answer is something like this. Just the lightest amount of structure needed to get the job done, which means actually initially it's going to be more structure and less and less and less. Well, I'm going to talk about why this is. Actually, first I'm going to go back to the previous video I mentioned, and I think I mentioned something about, oh, what are the different types of team coaching and which are really good and okay and which are not so good. And I said, well, so one type that they call it in the team diagnostic survey, the TDS, is unhelpful coaching, which is anything that's just not focused on task or improving the interpersonal group processes and operations, right? But really more specifically, what they frame that as anything where you're telling the team what to do and how they need to organize themselves to do this, and basically being overly prescriptive about what to do, that's really bad. That's the unhelpful coaching end of like, is this helping me individually perform the task better? Is this helping us get our interpersonal stuff better? Okay, then frickin' stop doing it, right? It doesn't actually help us, right? Some people that, and you can imagine from a coaching standpoint, it's not, anyone with a coaching background who buys into those premises, it's like, oh, well, this is far too prescriptive, right? Of course, that's a faux pas. This actually isn't news to us, right? We have known this. We've had some rough sense of this for some time. Like even some of our oldest leadership models in a modern sense, like the Tuckman, forming, storming, norming, performing model, or Ken Blanchard and Hersey have another situational leadership model, which is basically the same four stages, but from like the coaching side of what you're doing. It's the same basic thing, right? So both. I'll just quickly go through those four stages to lay those out. But so in forming, storming, norming, performing, the Tuckman model, it's like the first forming task. Basically, for both of them, that first stage is just onboarding. You're making sure people can do their individual work right, and so it's very task focused. Or in situational leadership, we would use the term that it's very directive, right? So then in the second stage, it's Tuckman would say it's task focused and relationship focused. Situational leadership would say it's directive and supportive, right? And then you just go from there. So by the second stage, it's the storming stage because you can do great results and you're really starting to gel and come together as a team, get some wins, and realize kind of how each other ticks. Start to develop habits of how you're working and working well together. It also feels great too when you can actually accomplish something not just on your own, but you're realizing like the value of having a real team around you. That feels fantastic, right? And then as you go up in stages from that, basically the manager needs to do less and less because in the third stage, they're supportive, they're relationship focused, but they're even less task focused and directive. And then eventually they don't need to do anything, right? So even by the fourth stage, you're already acknowledging, listen, the team can perform on its own. I can just pull back, and I don't need to do as much, which is perfect. All of those basically embody the ethos of transformational leadership, which is that you're trying to build capacity, and you could frame that in an individual sense, you can frame that in a team sense, you can frame that in an overall system of systems sense, right? Very transformational leadership. So back back to how much structure should you use? The lightest amount of structure possible. When you're onboarding someone, you need to give them a bit more structure. And in the midst of how the team is working, that the structure part of it is more like, do we know the business case? Do we know the way we add value and are people in the right seats? That's the structure piece you want to get right, but you don't want to tell people what to do. Or you just make sure you're in the right seat. And from there, it becomes more and more and more up to them. Okay, so what is the difference between self-managed and self-governing? This is still very flexible and up for debate, but something like this. Um, if a team is self-managing, it really just means that they don't need orders to operationally know how to do something, right? Or you could think of it as the basic strategy that they're pointing in is already set, but all the stuff about how they're going to do it, how they're going to handle tasks, how they're going to operate as a team to accomplish that, they can handle, right? Because their business case is set. Okay, so what would be one, strategic iteration further than that? What if they could actually explore and set their own strategy? Or let's reframe that. What if they could actually explore other ways of adding value, higher, more important, more impactful ways of adding value, and shift to that? Wouldn't you want that? Wouldn't that be great? Yeah, it would actually be great. That's what self-governance is. So actually, the reason right now we're seeing all this stuff around big scale agile stuff like disciplined agile and scaled agile framework and a bunch of other things about whole organizations going agile is that is actually a very natural extension from your team being able to be self-managed and handle all of their own internal team and how they get stuff done well to getting a better and better sense of not just how they add value but how the whole organization around them adds value, thinking of all the options that could be, and starting to realize actually, if we had the reins of how we add value, we could probably do a better job than whatever bosses are above us, right? And not just probably, like in a very clear sense, it's like, oh, this would be more value, and we can give you damn good reasons why it is more valuable, right? That's actually it's beautiful because it's on the far end of it. It's like they're so creative and enterprising about what that team could be that they're like improving on the strategic level. That's great. Here's also why it is terrifying and risky. Um, it requires, again, like each one of these stages requires another set of skills, not just the individual, but the team needs to demonstrate, right? So that the complexity amps up a notch. And you could imagine as you're getting into no, 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 we can manage ourselves. No, 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 we can set our own strategy and how we add value. You can imagine that starts to scope of work wise, scope of roles and functions, step on other people's toes. So if there are layers of middle management whose job it is to tell people what to do and you don't need their help anymore, if there are layers of people above you that just have, dated notions of kind of portfolio and performance management that aren't aligned to actually the ways that you can add value, you can see how that rubs people the wrong way, right? It becomes kind of politically contentious when you start saying things like, no, no, we can manage ourselves. We can decide our own strategy. Like, no, we've done it. We know better ways to add value now. We can prove it or we have proven it to you guys, right? Which is also why organizations can really lose their head on this stuff. Or if you try to introduce this to an organization which is not ready for it, you're going to have a lot of pushback, right? And so you can start to frankly see how trust and psychological safety or sense of survival and stability gets eroded when some massive change effort might mean that large amounts of staff aren't needed, or we go in some old direction, or it becomes clear that there's some percentage of staff, not just like mid to low end people that are curmudgeonly don't want to change, but high end people which really don't add high end people's in upper roles, but seniority people which really don't add a lot of value are like actually you're not contributing to better business value and a better business case, right? As much as that improvement would be good, it's almost like you have these upper level um, toxic is a strong word, but I would say, self-serving agents, hidden agendas is what we might call them, right? Now they may also be toxic, and then, toxicity is part of the sabotage of how they stop these big change efforts from happening. But that's not crazy to think that these kinds of org level change efforts would become very politically contentious. That that's a little bit doom and gloom. These are a fantastic opportunity, and this is actually the next stage of how, mid and large scale we can do, fantastic organizations and many multiple teams coordinated together. All this is to say that the least structure, the better. Your team's going to be better off for it. You're going to be a better manager for it. All right, I'll see you guys.